Have you ever dreamed of speaking fluently, effortlessly, and with confidence, just like a native speaker? Imagine expressing your thoughts smoothly, without pausing to translate in your head. Sounds impossible? Well, it's not. In this video, we're unlocking the magic of repetition and shadowing, two powerful techniques that have helped thousands of language learners speak naturally and without hesitation. Stick around, because by the end of this hour, you'll have the exact tools to train your brain, sharpen your pronunciation, and boost your fluency like never before. Ready? Let's dive in. Part 1. Repetition and shadowing techniques are two of the most powerful ways to improve fluency in any language. When learning a language, fluency does not come immediately. It takes time, effort, and practice. Many people struggle with speaking smoothly because they translate in their heads before speaking. This makes them slow and hesitant when forming sentences. To overcome this issue, repetition and shadowing can be very helpful. Repetition means practicing the same words, phrases, and sentences again and again. This helps the brain remember patterns, sentence structures, and pronunciation. When a person repeats a word multiple times, the muscles in the mouth get used to the sound. Speaking a language fluently is not only about knowing grammar and vocabulary. It is also about training the mouth and tongue to produce sounds naturally and quickly. Just like playing an instrument or a sport, practice makes perfect. Imagine you are learning a new song. In the beginning, you may not remember the lyrics. But after listening to the song many times, you automatically start singing along. This is because your brain stores the sounds and words, making it easy to recall. The same thing happens when learning a language through repetition. By repeating words and sentences many times, they become natural, and you can recall them without thinking. Shadowing is a more advanced technique that helps learners improve fluency, pronunciation, and rhythm quickly. Shadowing involves listening to a native speaker and repeating their words immediately, almost like an echo. The goal is to copy the speaker's pronunciation, intonation, and speech patterns exactly. This technique forces learners to speak without pausing to think, which improves fluency. To practice shadowing, find an audio clip or a video of a native speaker. It can be a podcast, a news report, or a dialogue from a TV show. Play the audio and try to repeat the words as soon as you hear them. Do not worry about understanding every single word at first. The goal is to mimic the speaker's sounds, rhythm, and tone. At first, it may feel difficult, because the speech may be too fast. But with practice, your brain and mouth will adjust. The more you do this, the easier it becomes. One important thing to remember is that repetition and shadowing should be done regularly. Practicing a few minutes every day is much better than practicing a long time once a week. Daily practice helps the brain form strong connections, making language use more automatic. Repetition and shadowing also help with confidence. When you hear yourself speaking fluently, even if you are copying someone, you start to believe that you can speak naturally. Let's take an example. Imagine you are learning English and you want to improve your fluency. You decide to start with simple sentences like, "How are you today?" or "I am going to the store." You repeat these sentences many times until they become part of your memory. Then, you listen to an audio clip where a native speaker says the same sentence. You try to shadow them, repeating right after them in the same rhythm and tone. At first, you may struggle, but after doing it multiple times, You start to match their speed and pronunciation. This type of practice helps you speak without thinking too much. Repetition also improves accuracy. Many language learners make mistakes while speaking, like mispronouncing words or using incorrect grammar. By repeating correct sentences many times, the brain starts to recognize the correct form naturally. This means you will make fewer mistakes over time. Another great thing about shadowing is that it improves listening skills. Many learners struggle to understand native speakers because they speak too fast. Shadowing helps train the brain to catch words quickly. When you follow along with a speaker, your listening ability improves because your ears get used to the natural speed and rhythm of the language. There are different ways to use repetition and shadowing. One method is to choose short sentences and practice them repeatedly. Another method is to listen to an entire conversation and shadow the speaker to improve fluency in full dialogues. Some learners prefer to watch movies or TV shows and shadow the characters to make it more fun. It is also helpful to practice with different types of voices. A news reporter, a character from a movie, or even a podcast host all have different speaking styles. By shadowing different speakers, you expose yourself to different accents, speeds, and tones, which will improve your overall fluency. When using the shadowing technique, it is important to focus on clear pronunciation rather than speed at first. If the speech is too fast, you can slow down the audio and practice at a comfortable pace. Over time, as you become more confident, you can increase the speed and try to match the native speaker exactly. A common mistake that learners make is feeling frustrated when they cannot keep up with the speaker. It is normal to struggle in the beginning. The key is to stay patient and continue practicing. It's okay to repeat the same sentence multiple times until it sounds natural. The more you do this, the smoother your speech will become. Another tip is to record yourself while practicing. When you listen to yourself, you can identify which words are difficult to pronounce and work on them separately. Comparing yourself to the native speaker also helps you notice what you need to improve. By combining repetition and shadowing, fluency can improve much faster than just studying grammar and vocabulary alone. Many successful language learners and polyglots use these techniques because they force them to speak naturally. Fluency is about being able to express thoughts without hesitation, and these methods help make that possible. The good thing is that repetition and shadowing can be done at any time. You can practice when walking, cooking, or waiting for a bus. Even a few minutes of practice every day can make a big difference over time. With enough practice, these techniques will help learners speak confidently, clearly, and naturally without stopping to think about words. The more you do it, the better you get. Part 2. Fluency in a language does not mean speaking fast. It means speaking smoothly, with confidence, and without long pauses. Many learners believe that if they speak fast, they will sound fluent. But speed is not as important as clarity. Repetition and shadowing help learners develop a natural flow in their speech by training them to think and speak in real time. One important part of both techniques is pronunciation. Many learners struggle with certain sounds in a new language. This happens because their native language does not have those sounds. For example, some English learners find it hard to pronounce the th sound in words like think or this. Others may have trouble with the difference between R and L. These challenges can be frustrating, but repetition helps the mouth get used to new sounds. When practicing repetition, it is useful to break words into smaller parts. Instead of trying to say difficult words all at once, learners can repeat just the difficult sounds first. For example, if the word through is difficult, they can start by saying the several times. Then they can add ru, 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 and finally say through all together. This method makes it easier to master difficult pronunciation steps. Shadowing is also great for improving pronunciation because it forces learners to copy native speakers exactly. When you listen to a native speaker closely, you notice how they move their tongue and mouth to produce sounds. You can repeat after them, trying to mimic the exact way they speak. Sometimes, exaggerating the sounds at first can help. If a word has a soft ending, learners can try saying it with extra emphasis before gradually reducing it to a normal level. Another common challenge for language learners is intonation. Intonation is the way a speaker's voice rises and falls in a sentence. Different languages have different intonations, which can change the meaning of words. For example, in English, the sentence, "You're coming tomorrow?" with a rising tone at the end sounds like a question. But if the tone is flat, it sounds like a statement. Shadowing helps learners understand and copy the correct intonation by listening carefully to how native speakers change their pitch. Fluent speech also depends on rhythm. Each language has its own rhythm and speed. Some languages, like Spanish, are spoken quickly with even timing between words. Others, like English, use a mix of short and long sounds. Shadowing helps learners develop this natural rhythm. When practicing, it helps to pay attention to which words are stressed in a sentence. In English, important words like nouns and verbs are stressed more than small words like the or and. By noticing these patterns and copying them, learners can sound more natural. One way to improve rhythm is to practice with short phrases that are spoken naturally. For example, instead of saying, "I am going to eat," a native speaker might say, "I'm gonna eat." The rhythm changes when words are spoken quickly in conversation. By shadowing spoken phrases, learners can develop this smooth, connected way of speaking. Some learners might worry that repeating and shadowing will make them sound unnatural or robotic. But in reality, these techniques do the opposite. They help train speech patterns so that language flows naturally. At first, repetition might feel mechanical, but after enough practice, the brain starts to produce words automatically. This is similar to how children learn to speak. By hearing the same words and repeating them over and over without thinking about grammar rules. Another way to use repetition effectively is to focus on full sentences rather than just single words. Single words are useful, but speaking fluently requires combining words into correct sentences. Instead of just repeating the word apple, learners can repeat a full sentence like, "I like eating apples in the morning." This helps build natural sentence structures. Shadowing is also helpful for learning how to handle pauses correctly. Native speakers do not pause randomly in the middle of a sentence. They pause at natural breakpoints, like at the end of a phrase or before emphasizing a word. By following the speech pattern of a native speaker, learners can practice where to place pauses naturally instead of stopping in unnatural places. It is also important to recognize that fluency is not about knowing every word. Even native speakers do not know all the words in their language. Instead of focusing too much on vocabulary, learners should focus on expressing themselves smoothly with the words they already know. Repetition and shadowing help with this by reinforcing commonly used phrases so that they become second nature. There are different ways to make repetition and shadowing more interesting. Some learners enjoy using songs because they have clear rhythm and repetition built into them. Others like using podcasts or audiobooks. Watching movies and imitating actors' speech is another fun way to practice. The key is to choose materials that are interesting, so practicing feels enjoyable rather than like a chore. For the best results, repetition and shadowing should be done with full focus. If a learner only half listens while doing other tasks, it will not be as effective. Taking short but focused practice sessions is better than long, unfocused ones. Learners should also be patient with themselves. Fluency does not happen overnight. It is a gradual process that improves with consistency. Some days might feel easier, and other days might feel frustrating. The key is to keep going. Even if progress seems slow, repetition works by reinforcing skills over time. Eventually, speaking smoothly becomes easier. Practicing in front of a mirror can also be helpful. Seeing how the mouth moves when saying difficult words can make it easier to adjust pronunciation. If a certain sound feels unnatural, watching how native speakers move their mouths when they say it can be a good guide. Using repetition and shadowing with real conversations is also beneficial. Learners can practice with a language partner and repeat words or phrases they learn during the conversation. If they hear a sentence that sounds natural, they can try saying it multiple times so they remember it for later use. Using these techniques regularly builds muscle memory. Just like athletes train their bodies to perform specific movements automatically, language learners train their mouths to produce words smoothly without extra effort. Over time, repetition and shadowing make speech more natural, helping learners express themselves confidently. Part 3. Another important benefit of repetition and shadowing is improving reaction time in conversations. Many learners struggle with speaking quickly because they have to think about grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation at the same time. This can create long pauses, making their speech sound unnatural. But with enough repetition, common phrases become automatic, reducing the need for thinking before speaking. For example, imagine someone asks, "How was your weekend?" If you have practiced answering this question with sentences like, "It was great, I went to the park," or "It was okay, I stayed home and relaxed," then your response will come naturally. You will not need to pause and translate in your mind. This is why repetition is important, not just for pronunciation, but also for quick thinking. Shadowing also helps reduce hesitation when speaking. Many learners hesitate because they are afraid of making mistakes. But shadowing forces continuous speaking, which helps build confidence. By repeating lines from native speakers, learners become comfortable speaking without stopping. One challenge of shadowing is keeping up with the speaker's speed. Native speakers often speak fast, and at first, it may feel difficult to copy them in real time. However, there are ways to make it easier. One method is to start with slow or clearly spoken materials, such as news broadcasts or language learning podcasts. Another method is to slow down the audio using a video player or app that allows speed control. Once you are comfortable at a slow speed, you can gradually increase it until you match the natural pace of the speaker. When practicing shadowing, it is helpful to choose materials that match your language level. If the sentences are too complex, it may be frustrating and hard to follow. Starting with simple dialogues makes the process smoother. For example, children's shows or beginner audio lessons are great for basic practice. Once comfortable with simpler sentences, learners can move to more complex conversations, such as TED Talks, interviews, or TV shows. A useful variation of shadowing is called delayed shadowing. Instead of repeating the speaker's words immediately, you wait for a brief moment before saying them. This technique can be useful for learners who find real-time shadowing too fast. It allows a small gap for understanding while still training fluency. Another important factor is intonation and emotion. Fluent speakers do not speak in a robotic tone. They express emotions through their voice, making their speech sound natural. Shadowing helps with this by allowing learners to copy the speaker's tone. If the speaker sounds happy, serious, or surprised, learners should try to imitate that feeling in their own voice. This makes their speech sound more human and expressive. Repetition can also be combined with writing practice. Some learners find it useful to write down the sentences they are repeating. This reinforces correct sentence structures and improves memory. Writing what you say also helps with spelling and understanding grammar naturally, without needing to study rules separately. Shadowing can be done anywhere and anytime. It does not require a teacher or a conversation partner, which makes it a convenient practice method. Learners can practice while walking, exercising, or doing household chores. The more exposure they get to real spoken language, the more effective their learning becomes. For learners who feel shy about speaking in public, shadowing is a great way to practice without pressure. Since it is done alone, there is no fear of making mistakes in front of others. Over time, this practice builds confidence, making it easier to speak in real conversations. One fun way to practice is by choosing favorite movie scenes and repeating the characters' dialogues. For example, if a learner likes a certain movie or TV show, they can listen to a short scene, pause after each line, and repeat it in the same way the character says it. This method makes learning enjoyable and helps learners remember phrases naturally. Another useful approach is practicing with common daily phrases. Many conversations in any language involve repeated phrases like, "How are you?" "What do you do?" or "That sounds interesting." By repeating these phrases daily until they are automatic, learners become better prepared for real interactions. It is important to note that shadowing and repetition should not replace actual conversation practice. While these techniques help build fluency, learners should also practice speaking with real people. Shadowing is a great way to prepare for conversations, but using the language in real life is just as important. To track progress, it can be helpful to record practice sessions. Listening to recordings allows learners to notice improvements over time. It also helps identify areas that need more practice. If a certain sound or phrase is not coming out smoothly, learners can focus on repeating it until it sounds natural. An additional way to make practice more effective is by using gestures and body movements. Speaking is not just about words. It also involves facial expressions, hand gestures, and body language. When shadowing, learners can try mimicking the speaker's movements to develop a more natural speaking style. Another useful technique is to challenge yourself with different speakers. Some learners get used to one voice if they always shadow the same speaker, but in real conversations, people speak differently. To improve listening and speaking skills, it is good to practice with a variety of voices: men, women, older people, younger people, and different accents. Fluency is not about perfection. Even native speakers make small mistakes when they talk. The important thing is to communicate ideas clearly and naturally. If a learner focuses too much on speaking perfectly, they may hesitate and lose confidence. Repetition and shadowing help by making speaking feel more automatic and reducing worry about making errors. It is also helpful to practice both alone and with others. Repeating and shadowing can be done individually, but speaking with real people provides valuable experience. If possible, learners should join language exchange groups, practice with friends, or find online speaking partners. This way, they can apply what they have learned in real situations. The best way to get results from repetition and shadowing is consistency. Practicing for 5 or 10 minutes every day is more effective than practicing for 1 hour once a week. The brain learns best through repeated exposure. Regular practice helps the brain get used to new words, phrases, and sentence structures, making them easier to use naturally. Fluency in a language is like building muscle strength. Just like exercising the body to become stronger, the brain needs regular speaking exercises to develop fluency. Repetition and shadowing are like daily workouts for the mouth and brain, helping learners become faster and more natural speakers. As learners continue practicing, they will notice that their thinking time decreases, and they start responding faster. They will feel more comfortable in conversations and less nervous when speaking. Over time, what once felt difficult will become automatic. By using repetition and shadowing correctly and consistently, learners can develop fluency in a much shorter time than traditional language learning methods. These techniques train the brain to think and speak in a new language naturally, helping learners express themselves confidently in real conversations. Part 4. A key part of fluency is developing confidence while speaking. Many learners know a lot of words and grammar, but when they have to speak, they hesitate or feel nervous. This is because they are not used to saying words out loud in a smooth way. Repetition and shadowing help remove this fear by making speech feel natural and familiar. When you say the same sentences over and over, they start to feel automatic. This gives you confidence because you no longer have to stop and think about every word before speaking. Confidence grows when you hear yourself speaking fluently. When you repeat sentences many times, you start to notice improvement in pronunciation, speed, and flow. This makes you feel good about your progress. Many people give up learning a language because they feel stuck. They think they are not improving, even when they are. But if you practice shadowing and listen to your own recordings, you can hear real progress over time. This helps you stay motivated and continue learning. One mistake many language learners make is only listening without speaking. Listening is important, but it is not enough to develop fluency. Shadowing forces you to speak out loud, getting your mouth used to producing sounds quickly. This is why it is such an effective technique. The more you speak, the more natural it becomes. Many learners also focus too much on grammar rules. While grammar is important, it should not stop you from speaking. Native speakers do not think about grammar while talking. Instead, they speak naturally because they have heard and used the language so much. Repetition and shadowing help train this instinct. By repeating correct sentences many times, you absorb grammar naturally without thinking about it. At first, it is normal to struggle with long sentences or fast speech. This is why starting with short and simple sentences is helpful. Instead of trying to shadow a long conversation immediately, start with a short phrase like, "How are you?" or "I am going to the store." Repeat it slowly at first, then increase the speed as you become comfortable. A good way to practice is to divide learning into 3 steps. First, listen carefully to a native speaker. Pay attention to their pronunciation, speed, and intonation. Second, repeat the sentence slowly, focusing on clarity. Third, try to shadow in real time, matching the native speaker's speed. This gradual process helps improve fluency without feeling overwhelmed. Shyness can be a big challenge for learners. Some people avoid speaking because they are afraid of making mistakes. Shadowing is a great solution because it allows you to practice alone before speaking with others. This helps you build confidence in private without pressure. Once you feel more comfortable, it becomes easier to speak with real people. Another great way to use repetition is with daily routines. You can choose a set of useful phrases and say them every morning. For example, you can practice ordering food with sentences like, "I would like a coffee, please," or describing the weather with, "It is sunny today." By repeating these phrases daily, they become natural and easy to use in real conversations. Shadowing also improves listening comprehension. Many learners find it hard to understand native speakers when they talk fast. But when you practice shadowing, your brain gets used to fast speech. This helps you understand words more quickly in real conversations. Over time, you will notice that you can catch words and phrases more easily, even when people speak quickly. Another useful tip is to focus on stress patterns in words. In English, certain syllables in words are stressed more than others. For example, in the word important, the stress is on the second syllable, important. If stress is placed incorrectly, it can make speech sound unnatural. Shadowing helps train your ear to recognize these patterns and helps your mouth get used to producing them correctly. One question many learners ask is, how long should I practice shadowing? The answer depends on your goals, but a good starting point is 10 to 15 minutes per day. Consistency is more important than long sessions. Even short daily practice can lead to big improvements over time. When selecting materials for shadowing, it's best to choose something interesting. If you enjoy what you are listening to, practice will feel easier and more enjoyable. Some learners like podcasts, others prefer TED Talks, and some enjoy movie dialogues. As long as the content is clear and at a suitable level, it will be useful for practice. It is also good to challenge yourself by shadowing different types of content. Shadowing news reports helps improve clear pronunciation. Shadowing casual conversations helps with natural speech flow, and shadowing motivational speeches helps with intonation and emphasis. A mix of different content types will help develop a well-rounded speaking ability. Recording your voice regularly during practice is very useful. When you listen to yourself, you can notice which areas need improvement. Maybe some words are not clear, or maybe your intonation sounds flat. By identifying these areas and practicing more, you can fix mistakes and improve faster. One common problem for learners is forgetting words while speaking. This happens because they do not use the words often. Repetition helps keep words fresh in the mind. When you repeat words daily, they stay in your memory, making it easier to recall them in conversations. Fluency is not just about speaking smoothly. It is also about responding naturally in conversations. Shadowing helps train reaction time by making sentence structures automatic. When you shadow enough, common phrases become instant responses in conversations. Another way to make repetition fun is by turning it into a game. For example, you can challenge yourself to repeat a sentence 5 times without hesitation. If you make a mistake, you start over. This makes practice more engaging and helps build fluency faster. For learners who want extra challenge, they can try paraphrasing while shadowing. Instead of repeating the exact sentence, they can keep the same meaning but change the words slightly. This helps improve flexibility in speech. For example, if the sentence is, "I love watching movies," they can say, "I really enjoy watching films." This keeps the conversation skill dynamic and fluent. Shadowing can also be combined with visual aids. Watching a video and shadowing at the same time can help learners see how the speaker moves their mouth and uses gestures. This makes it easier to copy the correct pronunciation and body language. Fluency takes time, but repetition and shadowing speed up the process. They allow learners to train their brains and mouths to work together efficiently. The more exposure to spoken language, the better the results. These techniques are used by many successful language learners because they provide real, noticeable improvements. A final tip is to relax while practicing. Many learners feel tense when trying to speak fluently. But language should feel natural and enjoyable. If you make a mistake, do not worry. Keep practicing, and over time, fluency will develop naturally. By using repetition and shadowing daily, learners can train their speech to become smooth, natural, and confident. These techniques remove hesitation, improve pronunciation, and make speaking a new language feel effortless. The key is patience and consistency. Small daily efforts bring great results over time. Part 5. One of the biggest advantages of repetition and shadowing is that they create a sense of familiarity with the language. Many learners struggle with fluency because they do not hear themselves speaking enough. They may listen to a lot of content, read books, and study grammar, but without regular speaking practice, they feel uncomfortable forming sentences out loud. Repetition and shadowing remove this discomfort by making speech a daily habit. Fluency is all about building natural speech patterns. Every language has common phrases that people use in everyday life. For example, in English, people often say, "How's it going?" or "Let me think about it." These phrases are heard and used frequently in conversations. By repeating them many times, they become part of the brain's automatic response system. This is why shadowing is powerful. It allows learners to absorb these patterns instead of trying to create sentences from scratch. One way to practice shadowing effectively is by selecting short clips with clear speech. Some learners try to shadow full TV shows or movies, but these often have background noise or fast dialogue, making it difficult for beginners. A better approach is to practice with short news segments, motivational speeches, or educational videos where speakers enunciate clearly. Another useful technique is looping. This means taking a sentence and repeating it multiple times before moving on to the next one. For example, if you are shadowing a phrase like, "That sounds like a great idea," you can repeat it 5 or 10 times before continuing. This reinforces pronunciation, rhythm, and speed, making the phrase easier to recall later. Body language and facial expressions also play a role in natural speech. When native speakers talk, they use hand movements and facial gestures to emphasize meaning. Shadowing with body movement helps learners sound more natural because speaking is not just about words, it is about expression. By mirroring the speaker's gestures while shadowing, learners can develop a more confident and dynamic speaking style. Some learners wonder whether shadowing works if they do not fully understand the words. The answer is yes. Shadowing is useful even when comprehension is low because it focuses on fluency and pronunciation rather than meaning. Many polyglots, or people who speak multiple languages, use shadowing before fully understanding the content. The goal is to train the brain and mouth to recognize sounds, intonation, and rhythm first. Understanding can come later with more exposure. However, comprehension does improve naturally with repeated exposure. If you shadow the same material multiple times, eventually, you start recognizing words and understanding their meaning without translation. This method helps learners think in their target language instead of translating from their native one. Another good approach is to break longer sentences into smaller parts. If a sentence is too difficult to shadow all at once, divide it into chunks. For example, instead of trying to repeat, "I really enjoyed going to the park with my friends yesterday because the weather was perfect," break it into 3 parts. "I really enjoyed going to the park," then, "with my friends yesterday," and then, "because the weather was perfect." Once each part is easy to shadow, combine them into a full sentence. This makes it less overwhelming while still improving fluency. Practicing different speech styles is also beneficial. Some people speak in a formal way, while others use casual, everyday language. By shadowing different types of speech, learners can develop flexibility and adapt to different situations. Shadowing a formal speech teaches a more structured way of speaking, while shadowing a casual conversation helps improve natural, relaxed speech. Another common problem learners face is running out of breath while speaking long sentences. Breathing correctly while talking is an important skill that repetition and shadowing help develop. Native speakers take natural breaths at the right moments while speaking. By listening to and copying these breathing patterns, learners can speak more smoothly without feeling out of breath. Practicing with emotion makes a big difference. Many language learners sound flat or monotone when speaking because they focus too much on words and not enough on expression. But emotion is a key part of natural speech. When shadowing, learners should try to copy not only words, but also the speaker's mood and feelings. If the speaker sounds excited, practice speaking with energy. If the speaker sounds serious, match that tone. This makes speech more engaging and convincing. One interesting way to improve fluency through shadowing is imagination-based practice. Learners can imagine themselves in different real-life situations and repeat useful sentences related to those situations. For example, they can pretend they are ordering food at a restaurant and say, "I'd like a cheeseburger with fries, please." By doing this repeatedly, their brain gets used to forming sentences quickly, which helps in real interactions. Another great way to practice is by shadowing alongside reading. Some learners find it helpful to read the script while shadowing until they become comfortable with the words. This is especially useful for beginners who may struggle with fast speech. Reading while listening helps connect spelling with pronunciation, making it easier to remember words. Like any skill, fluency takes time to develop. The key is patience and regular practice. If a learner practices for 5 minutes every day, they will improve faster than someone who practices for 1 hour only once a week. The more frequently the brain and mouth engage with the language, the more natural it becomes. Many learners believe fluency requires a huge vocabulary. While vocabulary is important, knowing thousands of words does not guarantee smooth speech. It is better to master a small set of useful phrases and repeat them until they become automatic. Shadowing helps reinforce these useful phrases so they can be used instantly in conversation. One method that learners can try is fill-in-the-gap shadowing. This means listening to a sentence, then pausing the audio and trying to say the next part before hearing it. For example, if the audio says, "I woke up this morning and," the learner should try to guess and say, "made a cup of coffee," before the speaker says the actual words. This improves both prediction and fluency. Another tip is practicing in different environments. Speaking fluently in a quiet room is easy, but real conversations happen in noisy environments. Practicing shadowing while walking outside, in a cafe, or even in a crowded place helps improve speaking confidence in different situations. Shadowing with music lyrics can also be a fun way to practice. Songs have natural rhythm, pronunciation, and connected speech, which can all improve fluency. Singing along with lyrics, even if not perfectly accurate, helps train the mouth to move quickly in a new language. As fluency improves, learners can try silent shadowing, which means moving the mouth and lips without making a sound. This trains muscle memory without using the voice. It is useful in public places where speaking out loud is not possible. The most important lesson is to enjoy the process. Repetition and shadowing are not meant to be stressful. They are tools to help speak naturally and with confidence. The more learners engage with these techniques, the more fluent they become. With continued practice, learners will eventually experience a breakthrough moment. One day they will have a conversation and realize that speaking feels natural, easy, and automatic. This moment is proof that repetition and shadowing work, turning language learning into a true skill rather than just a collection of words and grammar rules. Part 6. Fluency is not about speaking perfectly. It's about speaking naturally and comfortably. Many learners worry too much about mistakes, which slows them down. But repetition and shadowing help reduce this fear by making speech feel familiar. The more you say something, the more natural it becomes, and the less you worry about errors. This is why consistent practice is so important. One of the biggest challenges language learners face is thinking too much while speaking. They try to remember grammar rules, find the right words, and construct perfect sentences in their head before talking. This causes hesitation and unnatural pauses. Shadowing helps fix this problem by forcing learners to speak without stopping to think. Because you are repeating after a native speaker, your brain trains itself to flow with the language naturally. A great way to increase fluency is by focusing on chunks of language. Native speakers don't think about individual words, they think in groups of words. For example, instead of thinking about the grammar in "What do you think about this?" they simply say it as a whole phrase. Shadowing these chunks of language helps learners speak faster and sound more natural. Listening for natural speech patterns is also important. Many languages, including English, use contractions and reduced speech in conversation. For example, instead of saying, "I am going to go," a native speaker might say, "I'm gonna go." By shadowing real conversations, learners get used to these patterns and start using them automatically. Some learners struggle with sounding too robotic when repeating sentences. To make speech sound more natural, it helps to add variation. Instead of repeating a sentence the exact same way each time, try saying it with different emotions, speeds, and tones. This makes practice more dynamic and improves the ability to adapt to different situations. A good trick for improving fluency is called speed shadowing. This means starting at a slow pace and increasing speed gradually. At first, learners can shadow slowly, focusing on clear pronunciation. As they become comfortable, they can try speaking faster until they match the native speaker's speed. This trains the brain and mouth to process language quickly. Another important aspect of fluency is the ability to continue speaking even when struggling with a word. Native speakers do this all the time by using filler words like or you know. These words give the speaker time to think without stopping the flow of speech. Shadowing conversations that include fillers can help train this skill so that speech remains smooth even when unsure of the next word. To make shadowing even more effective, learners can combine it with personal storytelling. For example, after shadowing a sentence like, "I went to the market yesterday," learners can create their own variation. "I went to the park yesterday," or "I went to the beach last weekend." This helps connect shadowing to real-life conversation skills. One fun variation of repetition practice is to use voice assistants or AI chatbots. Speaking to a chatbot and trying to mimic its responses helps practice pronunciation and fluency in a way that feels interactive. It is also useful to shadow different accents. Every language has regional accents and variations. By practicing with different speakers, learners train their ears to understand various ways of speaking. This makes listening and responding in real-life conversations much easier. Another technique that can help with natural speech flow is mirroring. This means copying not just the words of the speaker, but also their body language, facial expressions, and even breathing patterns. This builds a deeper connection with the language and improves overall communication skills. Practicing in different moods and energy levels is also important. Sometimes people feel tired or unmotivated, and in those moments, fluency might feel harder. By practicing shadowing during different emotional states, excited, relaxed, or even sleepy, learners train themselves to speak smoothly in any situation. A useful exercise is role-playing shadowing. This means acting out a situation while shadowing. For example, if shadowing a dialogue about ordering food at a restaurant, learners can pretend they are in a restaurant and use hand gestures while speaking. This makes practice more interactive and memorable. Fluency training does not always have to be active. Passive shadowing can also be helpful. This means listening to content and silently forming the words in your mouth without actually speaking out loud. This is useful for situations where speaking aloud is not possible, like on public transport or in a quiet place. For those who like writing, a method called write and shadow can be helpful. This means writing out sentences from an audio clip, then shadowing them after reading. This strengthens both listening and pronunciation skills at the same time. Fluency also comes from learning to handle interruptions. In real conversations, people interrupt or ask questions unexpectedly. Practicing shadowing with dialogues that have interruptions helps prepare for these real-life situations. To keep shadowing practice fresh, learners can switch between different types of content. Some days they can shadow casual conversations. Other days, they can shadow news reports, speeches, or storytelling. This variety makes practice more engaging and helps with adaptability. One advanced technique is to shadow without sound. This means muting the audio and trying to say the sentence before the speaker does, based only on memory and lip movement. This improves retention and speech coordination. Fluency becomes natural when practice includes variety, consistency, and real-world application. Shadowing prepares learners for real conversations, and repetition makes sure that common sentences become easy to say. Over time, these techniques help learners become confident speakers who can express themselves effortlessly. By continuing to practice daily, learners will notice that their thinking time decreases, their speech becomes smoother, and their confidence grows. The journey to fluency is never instant, but with the right techniques, progress happens faster and more naturally. Part 7. As fluency improves through repetition and shadowing, learners start to notice an important change. They no longer need to translate sentences in their head before speaking. Instead, words and phrases come naturally, allowing them to respond in real time. This is one of the biggest signs of progress in language learning. Translation is a common habit for beginners. When learning a new language, people often think in their native language first, then try to translate their thoughts before speaking. This slows down the conversation and creates hesitation. But with enough repetition, the brain starts thinking directly in the target language. Shadowing speeds up this process because it forces learners to copy native speakers without stopping to analyze each word. Fluent speakers use natural sentence structures without overthinking them. For example, when an English speaker wants to talk about their morning, they don't stop to choose every word carefully. They simply say, "I woke up, took a shower, and had breakfast." These types of sentences come from experience and practice, not from memorizing grammar rules. Shadowing and repetition help develop this kind of automatic recall. Another important benefit of these techniques is building a natural vocabulary. Many learners spend time memorizing long word lists, but individual words are not enough to become fluent. Words need to be learned in context. Instead of memorizing delicious, dinner, and restaurant separately, it is better to practice whole sentences like, "That was a delicious dinner at the restaurant." Repeating full phrases helps learners internalize common patterns, making it easier to form new sentences. One useful method for improving retention is spaced repetition. This means reviewing words and sentences at increasing intervals, after 1 day, then 3 days, then a week. Combining spaced repetition with shadowing reinforces memory, making it easier to recall words when needed. To practice shadowing more effectively, learners can break down their practice into 3 levels: slow, natural, and fast. First, they repeat sentences slowly, focusing on pronunciation and clarity. Then, they move on to natural speed, matching the speaker's rhythm. Finally, they try to speak slightly faster than the speaker. This challenges their brain to process the language quickly, improving reaction time in conversations. Another helpful technique is shifting focus. Each time learners shadow a sentence, they can concentrate on a different aspect. For example, the first time they focus on pronunciation. The second time, they focus on rhythm. The third time, they pay attention to word stress and intonation. By shifting focus, learners improve different skills without feeling overwhelmed. Fluency is not just about pronunciation, but also about confidence. Many learners hesitate because they fear making mistakes. Shadowing helps break this fear by giving them the experience of speaking without stopping. If a word is difficult to say, the best approach is to repeat it slowly multiple times and then gradually increase the speed. This technique trains the mouth and tongue to move smoothly. Another way to build confidence is by using positive rehearsal. This means shadowing sentences that are useful in real-life situations. For example, if learners are preparing for a job interview, they can shadow answers to common questions like, "I have experience working in customer service." If they are planning to travel, they can repeat sentences like, "Can you recommend a good local restaurant?" Practicing these sentences multiple times makes them feel natural when speaking to real people. As fluency grows, it becomes easier to understand fast speech. Many learners struggle to follow native speakers because they speak quickly and use connected speech. For example, in natural conversation, "What do you want to do?" sounds like, "What do you want to do?" Shadowing helps train the ear to recognize these reductions, making it easier to understand real conversations. One creative way to practice is by adding gestures while shadowing. Research shows that using hand movements and facial expressions while speaking improves memory and fluency. Acting out sentences while shadowing can make learning more engaging and help with recall. For example, when saying "I picked up the phone," learners can pretend to lift an imaginary phone. This adds a physical connection to language learning. Learners who want an extra challenge can try silent shadowing. This means forming words with their mouth without making sound. This technique strengthens muscle memory and is useful for practicing in public places where speaking out loud may not be possible. A common mistake learners make when shadowing is focusing only on pronunciation while ignoring sentence meaning. While pronunciation is important, understanding the meaning of each sentence helps improve recall and real communication skills. Even if learners do not understand every word at first, breaking sentences down and analyzing them after shadowing can help improve comprehension. Language learners can also benefit from interactive shadowing. This means having a two-way approach by adding responses to the sentences being shadowed. For example, if the speech includes, "How was your weekend?" learners can answer, "It was great! I went to the beach." This method turns passive shadowing into active participation. Another way to practice is by using voice recording software. By recording their own shadowing sessions and playing them back, learners can compare their pronunciation with the native speaker's version. This makes it easier to identify areas that need improvement. One advanced technique is role reversal shadowing. This means not only repeating what a native speaker says, but also imagining what the other person in the conversation would say. For example, if shadowing a dialogue where one person says, "Let's meet at 3 p.m., learners can imagine replying, "That sounds perfect. See you then." This helps prepare for real conversations. It is also useful to practice with different types of speakers. Some people speak slowly and clearly, while others speak quickly or have strong accents. Shadowing a variety of voices prepares learners for different conversational situations. Shadowing with background noise is another helpful practice. In real life, people rarely speak in silent environments. There are always distractions, background chatter, traffic, or music. Practicing shadowing with some background noise can help train concentration and improve listening skills in real-world situations. At an advanced level, learners can try mimicry shadowing, where they imitate not just the words, but also the speaker's emotions, tone, and energy. This helps with expressive communication and makes speech sound more natural. For learners who enjoy social learning, practicing shadowing with a friend can be a great technique. One person plays the role of the native speaker, while the other repeats after them. Switching roles after a few sentences makes practice more interactive. Another fun approach is using shadowing with storytelling. Listening to a short story and repeating it out loud helps improve both fluency and memory. Then, learners can try retelling the same story in their own words to strengthen their speaking skills further. Creating a daily shadowing routine makes progress faster. Even 5 to 10 minutes a day can produce noticeable results over time. The key is consistency. Regular exposure to spoken language reinforces fluency and confidence. Repetition and shadowing are not just techniques for learning. They are tools for transforming language skills. They train the brain and mouth to work together efficiently, making language use feel effortless. By continuing to use these methods, learners will reach a point where speaking a new language feels just as natural as speaking their native one. With dedication and persistence, fluency is not just a goal, it becomes a reality. Part 8. As learners continue practicing repetition and shadowing, they will notice that their speech feels more natural and their confidence grows. At first, it may feel difficult, but over time, speaking smoothly becomes second nature. The more a learner repeats phrases, the less they have to think about forming sentences. This is the key to fluency, being able to speak effortlessly without hesitation. One of the most important aspects of fluency is rhythm. Every language has its own rhythm, just like music. Some languages, like English, have a mix of short and long sounds. Others, like Italian or Spanish, have a more even melodic rhythm. When shadowing, learners should pay close attention to how native speakers stress certain words and how their speech flows. By copying these patterns exactly, they can match the natural rhythm of the language. Intonation is another crucial element. Intonation is the rise and fall of the voice while speaking. If a sentence is spoken with a flat tone, it may sound unnatural or robotic. But if learners imitate the natural rise and fall in a sentence, they will sound more like native speakers. Shadowing is a great way to develop this skill because it forces learners to copy intonation patterns from real speech. Another benefit of shadowing is learning how native speakers link words together. In natural speech, words are often connected. For example, in English, instead of saying each word separately like, "What are you doing?" a native speaker might say, "What you doing?" The words blend smoothly, making the sentence sound more natural. Shadowing helps learners recognize these connections and use them in their own speech. A useful way to improve fluency is to practice different types of speech styles. Formal speech, such as news reports or TED Talks, has a clear structure and slower pace. Informal speech, such as casual conversations or dialogues in movies, is more relaxed and faster. By shadowing both types, learners can adapt to different speaking situations. To make shadowing more engaging, learners can set small challenges for themselves. One challenge could be shadowing for 1 minute without pausing. Another challenge could be recording a sentence and trying to match the native speaker exactly. These small challenges help track progress and keep motivation high. Fluency is not just about pronunciation. It also involves using language naturally in conversation. A good way to practice is by shadowing common phrases used in daily life. Phrases like, "That makes sense," "I see what you mean," or "Let me check," are used frequently in natural speech. By repeating these phrases, learners can develop automatic responses, making conversations easier. Repeating the same sentence in different ways is another useful technique. If a learner shadows the sentence, "I'm going to the store," they can practice variations like, "I'm heading to the store," or "I'll run to the store later." This helps them build flexibility in their speech, so they don't sound repetitive when speaking with others. A helpful way to reinforce shadowing practice is by writing down the sentences being repeated. Seeing the words on paper while saying them out loud strengthens memory. It also helps understand how words are spelled versus how they are pronounced, which is especially useful in languages with irregular spelling rules, like English. Some learners may feel frustrated if they cannot match the native speaker's speed immediately. It is important to remember that fluency takes time. The best approach is to start slowly, focus on accuracy, and gradually increase speed. Shadowing is about progress, not perfection. Even if a learner cannot match everything perfectly at first, continuous practice leads to steady improvement. Another good exercise is comparing self-recordings over time. A learner can pick a sentence to shadow today, record themselves saying it, and then repeat the process a week later. By listening to both recordings, they can hear how much they have improved in pronunciation, speed, and fluidity. For those who want extra challenge, they can try storytelling shadowing. This means listening to a short story and trying to repeat it as they hear it. If they struggle, they can pause and repeat each sentence before moving forward. This improves long-term fluency and memory at the same time. A simple but effective tip is to practice shadowing in front of a mirror. This allows learners to see how their mouth moves when forming words. If certain sounds are difficult, they can observe how native speakers move their lips and tongue and try to copy their movements. Practicing shadowing in different moods and energy levels also helps. Sometimes learners feel energetic and excited, while other times they feel tired. Shadowing in different states trains the brain to speak smoothly no matter how they feel. This is important because in real-life conversations, people do not always speak when they feel their best. One more advanced technique is delayed shadowing. Instead of repeating words immediately after the speaker, the learner waits for a few seconds before repeating them. This method challenges the brain to retain information for a longer period before speaking, which strengthens both memory and fluency. While shadowing is a powerful technique, it is also important to combine it with real conversations. Speaking with language partners, teachers, or friends gives real-world practice and helps learners apply what they have practiced. The combination of shadowing and real conversations accelerates fluency. To keep things interesting, learners can rotate between content types. Some days they can shadow podcasts. Other days they can shadow movie dialogues, news reports, or even song lyrics. Changing sources keeps learning exciting and prevents boredom. Fluency is like muscle memory. It develops through constant repetition. Just as athletes train their bodies to perform movements without thinking, language learners train their mouths to say words automatically. The more repetitions, the stronger the memory becomes, making speech flow naturally. The key to success is consistency. It is better to practice shadowing for 10 minutes every day than to practice for 1 hour once a week. Regular small amounts of practice are more effective because the brain retains information better with daily exposure. As learners continue practicing, they will notice a big change. Words that once felt difficult to pronounce will start to feel effortless. Sentences that took time to think about will now come out naturally. This is the result of repetition and shadowing. It transforms language learning from a slow process into an automatic skill. Eventually, learners will reach a point where they no longer need to practice shadowing as much because fluency has become natural. But even at an advanced level, shadowing remains a useful tool for maintaining fluency, improving pronunciation, and learning new accents. By understanding how repetition and shadowing work, learners can use these techniques to speed up fluency and gain confidence in speaking. The path to fluency is not about memorizing thousands of words. It is about training the brain and mouth to work together smoothly. The more they practice, the easier and more enjoyable speaking becomes. In the end, fluency is not just about the ability to speak. It is about the confidence to communicate naturally, express thoughts easily, and enjoy using the language in real situations. With enough repetition and shadowing, this level of fluency is possible for anyone willing to put in the effort. And there you have it. Repetition and shadowing. Two simple yet powerful techniques that can completely transform the way you speak. Remember, fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about being confident and natural. The more you practice, the smoother your speech will become. So don't stop here. Take what you've learned today and put it into action. Repeat, shadow, and watch your fluency skyrocket. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another fluency boosting video. Let me know in the comments. What's the hardest part of speaking fluently for you? I'd love to help. Keep practicing, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy speaking!